to Youth Views. I am joined with the one and only Guy Lucas Barner. Guy, how are we?
Very good, thank you. Very positive. Looking forward to the official launch of the general election campaign. But as always, a pleasure to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Guy, listen, we need to use the beginning of this stream to make a big appeal because, as you can see in the image of this live stream, is we are missing James Cleverly, the Conservative Party chairman. He was supposed to be booked in to do a show with Kay Burley live on Sky News this morning, but there unfortunately is an empty chair. Now I'm getting really worried for James Cleverly.
What I'd say to our viewers is we're concerned about him. We reached out and tried to get him on YouthViewz. He pledged he would come along, and he's not turned up today. It's the second time today. We're really concerned, guys. Please.
That doesn't sound like James Cleverly not turning up to a media appearance.
Well, as I commented earlier, that empty chair interview was the best interview that James Cleverly's ever delivered.
James Cleverly. And if James Cleverly at all epitomises a Tory, now this is exactly it. I mean, he lies out of his teeth, and we'll touch later a little bit in terms of the other lies the Tories have told, not just today but in previous few days. But let's talk about that. Let's start with what happened this morning. So it was politics at peak entertainment, really, because I wake up as I do, and I check you check what's gone on Twitter and what's happening in the little rumor space, and I see this video that's almost trending of Kay Burley from Sky News, and anybody who watches Sky News knows that Kay Burley, she holds no prisoners, does she? She was fuming, and she was actually literally fuming. It wasn't an act; she was really angry. And there's this clip of her. It's about 2 or 3 minutes long of her basically talking to an empty chair, where James Cleverly was supposedly had confirmed his appearance to discuss a number of issues. But those issues that had rumbled overnight, that had turned into, and we'll be discussing them later, no doubt, was clearly too much for James Cleverly to stand up, excuse that, to sit down and discuss. He actually got scared, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, we had a situation the other day when James Cleverly and the Conservative Party had been found out for doctoring a video of Keir Starmer, manipulating kind of what he was saying. They tried to pitch it that he didn't have an answer to the question, and James Cleverly was actually on this morning, and he was talking with Piers Morgan and Susanna Reid. And I'm no fan of Piers Morgan, but Piers Morgan took him down completely. He said, "You doctored this video. If you thought the position was crazy enough, why didn't you just put the original video up? Why have you doctored this video?" And he said, "We've edited it. It needed to be shorter so we could upload it."
More lies, wasn't it? More lies, Guy.
Excuse. And I think what you touched on about him being too scared to come in and address the issues, there were a lot of tricky questions there, and we know he's not good under pressure. I think after that scare from Piers Morgan, in quite a coward-like way, he scurried off from that interview and deliberately missed it. And it's a shame, because politicians need to be held accountable. If that was a Labour MP who'd pledged to sit there, I'd be equally as angry if they didn't turn up.
Yeah, totally. But the thing is, I mean, the reaction would have been far different. But what you then had is, and this was equally as pathetic, really, is that you had your right-wing hack Julia Hartley Brewer then basically making up lies and tweeting out, he wasn't there because he was supposed to be with me. Well, Kay Burley was literally pointing to him in the studio saying he's 15 feet away. And she said, "I've just spoken to him on the break." I mean, she could have gone in harder, to be fair, Guy. I mean, I wish she had, but I mean, the humiliation was just, I mean, I've never been involved in an election where the first official day of election has held so much drama. It just tells you what's more to come with this shit show of a Tory government.
I saw the clip earlier today of Kay Burley and the empty chair, and I just sat there. It was a good minute and a half, 2 minutes, just in complete astonishment, because she went in. She really went in, and it came from a place of passion, which is good, because we're finally starting to see the media holding the government to account for the kind of manipulative, scurrying cowards that they are.
I'm just, while you're saying that, I'm just gonna hashtag find James Cleverly.
Yeah.
If any of our viewers are on our Twitter, I've just sent that out as a tweet. Hashtag find James Cleverly, because we're still looking for him on for him to turn up to this Sky, because I genuinely, truly, and he's been a spokesperson for the Tory party for quite some years. He generally, I mean, he lies out of his teeth, and he thinks that actually he entertains as he basically Corbyn cusses. That's what I call it. He just basically smears and smears and smears. But I think there's something else that's quite significant today, because I think, and no doubt this ties into the James Cleverly thing. I think the strategy that the Tory party are sort of deploying for this election, it looks really unstructured. It looks chaotic. It looks like, and we'll obviously talk a little bit later about the Jacob Rees-Mogg thing again that sort of blew up yesterday. But I think this article that Boris Johnson wrote in the Telegraph, where he basically compared, did you catch that? Well, I mean, it was all over the channels, where he basically compared Jeremy Corbyn to Stalin. And for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, Stalin was a dictator that basically killed millions and millions of people. But this kind of thinking that the Conservatives have got, that actually we will use the so-called low ratings of Jeremy Corbyn to plaster it out there, and literally, I think that's what Cleverly was prepared to do that morning. But I think when you had the sort of snowball of all of the other stuff, Kay Burley had listed in her a couple of minutes fume about what she was going to speak to him about, I literally think he shat his pants.
I mean, it's actually, I'm quite ashamed of Boris Johnson. I know that, you know, he is a very bad man, but I'm ashamed that he's compared Jeremy Corbyn to Stalin, because Stalin was a mass murderer. He killed almost 3 million people in a genocide, and he was a dictator. And the situation we have here is this. If we were to compare Boris Johnson to Hitler, if we were to compare him to someone of the magnitude of Stalin, the kind of the magnitude of killings, there would be complete outrage from the right. And Corbyn has never done that, because he's principled. He's not playing gutter politics. He's not playing dirty politics, and he's not running a dirty campaign. And Boris Johnson's campaign quite literally sums up the way he would run this country: chaotic, messy, and unorganized. And if you really think you can trust the Conservatives running our country for another 5 years under Boris Johnson, after seeing this campaign they're running, where they're comparing an official leader of the opposition party, the second biggest party in Parliament, to a mass murderer, it's just despicable, and there's no place for it in our politics.
You're right, and listen, you know what, Guy? I think there's only so much you can smear a man before even the least of sensible people out there see how much bullshit is in it. And I think I truly believe this. I've held this view for some time. Nobody truly knows what bounced Labour in 2017 to give them 40%. But I truly think that this strategy of let's just go out and attack the man, attack the person, and it will work with us because actually we're so far ahead and we're the sitting government. I think that backfired on them, because the many people that I spoke to, and when you looked at Twitter and Facebook and all of the sort of social media spaces, were, I'm joining Labour today because I can't take this crap. That basically, because what this almost does is it has a backfiring effect, because they're almost kind of selling the news for Jeremy Corbyn when they smear him like this. And I think what was happening is that this almost sort of not so well-known man became infamous by these smears, that people started to find out, and people who were interested in voting started to do a bit of research into him. And let's be fair, the research you do into Corbyn, when you look at his voting record, when you look at sort of his promise and what he's delivered on that, is basically flawless. There probably isn't a politician as honest as him. And in politics, in certainly in general elections, honesty and trust go a really, really far way in terms of winning votes. And I think, I mean, it didn't help with Theresa May's campaign being absolutely shocking. And that did not help. So I think this is where I worry for the Tories, not too much, but I worry that I think that they're a one-trick pony when it comes to elections. They're trying to mask their inability to deliver or promise good policies by continuing to smear the man that is Jeremy Corbyn.
And do you know what else is concerning about the Starling comments is Boris Johnson hasn't learned his lesson that words can lead to consequences.
Yeah.
We had a situation a while back when he made some disgusting comments about women who wear burqas being, I think it was post boxes and bank robbers. In the week following, there was a 375% rise in Islamophobia. This is affecting real people. And I see it on the doorstep every day. One of the most common comments that are used to abuse us activists is communist, Stalin, dictator, like Marxist, all these things that we get thrown at us on the doorstep. And what Boris Johnson is doing is actually emboldening these people to further this. It's coming from our Prime Minister. Of course these people are going to say it. He's giving them a reason to do it. And it's the same when in Parliament people stood up and they were concerned, MPs stood up concerned about their welfare. I think Paula Sheriff was
that's correct.
And then in response he called their concerns humbug and he dismissed them completely. And he just hasn't learned his lesson that he is a role model, whether we like it or not. He has to be a role model and he has to be extremely careful with the words he uses. And these attacks, completely far from the truth, and this misinformation, these Starling comments are going to hurt a lot of people. And it's not necessary. If he was so proud of the Conservative Party's record, he should run a clean campaign on policy, but they've got nothing and they're just reaching into the gutter now. It's disgraceful, really.
And you're absolutely right. And it's not just Boris Johnson, because and this is where, I think they're running a really, really poor campaign, because when they're there's almost like nobody there that's monitoring this and saying, guys, this is causing a real shit show for us. We need to, in the middle of the strategy, U-turn and maybe put some publication out that basically softens the blow. Because then you have Nadeem Savasi, I think his name is, later on the Andrew Neil show. And when and that's quite later in the day, when Nadeem has had the chance to basically clarify this, and he was talked about. I mean, you know what Andrew Neil is like when it comes to interviewing. He's far worse than Kay Burley. I mean, he's angelic compared to Kay Burley, to be honest, and she's bad. But he then repeated the spread that was in the Telegraph, and rather than sort of softening the blow and saying, they may have been able to say, look, it's quite humorous, it's blah 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 blah. You actually found Nadeem agreeing and actually trying to back up the article. Again, you saw a similar situation, and these guys, they're all coming out with their trousers down, because you had Andrew Brudgeon, who had then backed up Rees-Mogg's comments about the Grenfell deceased and them lacking common sense, and that actually he was far superior, and had he been one of the Grenfell residents, that he would have defied the fire services comments and got out of the building. Later, as I said, that was backed up by one of his MP colleagues. You found him apologising today. So it's almost like the message to clean up the shit is reaching them very, very late in the day, but by that time the damage is already done.
I mean, what I've learned from my very short time in politics so far is that when you're in a party, you've got to keep a consistent message on all fronts. When I run social media for people and I work on social media, we always make sure everything's going out is consistent. And it's the point you touched on about there's so much disconnection between what they're saying. There's people backing it up, people apologizing. It's just like, what on earth is happening? You guys need to make a WhatsApp group or something. I mean, what's going on? And I'll refer to a specific point. James Cleverly and this whole doctoring the Keir Starmer video. You had Johnny Mercer, a Tory MP, sharing that video on Twitter, and then shortly after he realised it was doctored, he apologised and said, "Sorry, I shouldn't have shared this. It was doctored. I didn't know."
You're right. You did. Yeah.
Shortly after, James Cleverly is on This Morning with Piers Morgan and Susanna Reid, still backing up, despite the fact one of his own MPs has apologised. So even if you're wrong, at least keep a consistent line on it. I mean, come on, it's just crazy.
It's literally, I think there's an arrogance there, a similar arrogance to what we saw in the 2017 election, that Labour are just so far behind and poor. We don't even need to consider them as a threat. But listen, we're in election territory. Underestimate any party at your peril, and I think that's certainly a lesson that the new. Listen, this is my opinion. Had Theresa May still been Prime Minister, I think she would have run a much better election campaign, and she would have been learning from the mistakes that she had made, or her cabinet had made, or her election campaign had made last time around. What we have now is we have a buffoon in the sort of name of Mr. Boris Johnson, who basically thinks that, you know, there's almost an entitlement here. We'll win this election without any with minimal effort. Well, they're finding out very, very quickly. Day one of election is not that easy, is it?
I think what you said is quite right. I think if we still had Theresa May, if you give her anything, she would have learned from her mistakes. And she would have started on a different note, on a different tune, stuck to her policy line instead of U-turning like last time, and actually a bit of charisma, because that was another problem in 2017 for Theresa May. She didn't get people fired up, didn't get people excited about her message. It was a big success of Corbyn kind of getting people excited about the change we were going to deliver. With Boris Johnson here, I think what he's done is he said, we need to make this campaign about me, and that's why it's chaotic, messy, and unorganized, because that characterizes him kind of in itself. And I don't know what they're trying to do here, or what the strategists are getting up to, but they need to meet and they need to decide what's going on here, because this kind of campaign it's only going to damage them. So, you know, keep going, Tories, if you want to lose this election, but you need to get your stuff together.
And we, you know, the other thought as well is, Guy, that this perspective about them being, I mean, obviously you take Rees-Mogg's comments into consideration, but this perspective that they're so far out of touch with public sort of thought or public perspective. There's this Russian report as well, the Russian interference report that the government are currently withholding. You've got Dominic Grieve coming on literally every 5 minutes on the Sky News and the other news channels saying the report is ready. It's gone through all of the normal processes. In the last 15 years, there's never been a case where it's needed more than the 10 days that's had been allocated.
Well, this government does not follow precedent. I think we've learned that.
And there's a reason why on this particular issue that the government's not following precedent. And I wonder what is in this Russian report. And that's for our viewers, by the way, anybody that hasn't sort of caught up with that, because there's a lot to sort of discuss and catch up on. But there's been an inquiry carried out into alleged Russian interference in our last few general elections and referendum and stroke general election. And that's not just sort of physical interference in terms of voting and what we're talking about, influence online. We're talking about, you know, possible other countries and cross country interference and whatnot. And this report has been ready. And Dominic Grieve was, I believe, is involved in. He was one of the stakeholders or on the committee for forming this report. Now, this report has gone in, and literally the last stage of that report is for Boris Johnson to sign the report off. And the government are basically saying that we will not reveal this report until after the general election. What do you think's in that report that they want to hide, Guy?
I mean, if we're speculating, the baseline of that report would probably reveal evidence of interference in the 2016 referendum, 2017 general election. I think the injustice of it not being published comes down to one thing: it's that it might reveal places in our democracy where we are vulnerable to this kind of thing. And if it were to be revealed, we'd obviously implement security measures and we'd make sure it can't happen again. So the fact that we're not revealing it means that there may be some sort of issue with our election system that makes us quite vulnerable to influence from other countries. And I don't know if you agree with me, but it's actually part of a wider problem. That in the world, there's almost a systemic issue where the elite and the rich meddle in our democratic exercises in order to influence the outcome. I cite Donald Trump, for example, endorsing one of the candidates, Boris Johnson, to become prime minister. That's foreign interference in an election, whether you like it.
He's facing impeachment inquiries at the moment, Donald Trump, because of the Ukraine issues. I mean, we're not trying to sidetrack this, but I mean, they're all involved in it, aren't they?
I mean, Donald Trump also said Corbyn would be bad for our country. I think if Donald Trump's saying that you're bad for your country, you're probably doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely. And the worst thing about it is it's like, well, actually, let's just break this down and be simple. We are in the middle of a general election. What is in that report? Surely the best time to reveal that is now, so that the public can see what has gone on in previous general elections, so that we can safeguard ourselves in order to prevent it from happening again. I think that there's going to be some heads rolling come the release of this report.
I mean, it could potentially implicate the Tories and do damage to them. That may be why they're withholding it from us.
Maybe. Well, didn't Dominic Cummings? Have you heard that he spent 3 years after university?
Yeah, he took a little holiday,
living in Russia.
To Russia, didn't he?
Yeah.
There's a whole multitude of things we could discuss that are wrong with Dominic Cummings, and he is part of the problem here.
And the Aaron Banks involvement with Farage.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of a wider issue that people with money in our society are able to influence the result of elections because they can use that money in a certain way. For example, targeting advertisement online, or what we had is a scandal with the Brexit Party, that you're not allowed to receive, if you receive donations of, I think it's £500, you have to declare your name to the electoral.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And it had been found allegedly that hundreds of £499 donations had been funneled into the Brexit Party's account. Therefore, they don't have to declare who that is. That could be some sort of foreign investor.
Yeah.
Part of a wider issue, and it's a global issue, that money can corrupt our politics, and money actually influences the results, so that the rich and the elite keep the people in power who will protect them and their offshore accounts.
Absolutely. And I think, you've hit the nail absolutely on the head there. And to all of our viewers who are watching live and who will watch after this, is that, what can we do about this? This is democracy that's being basically restricted. We are not being told something that is in the interest of our democratic right. So what we would urge you to do is write to your MP and request. I mean, I know it doesn't sort of mean anything now because technically none of them are MPs, but I think they need to have it in their inbox that actually this is something that the public find important. And believe me, it will hurt the government at the ballot box. Even the most moderate of people who are remotely interested in politics will want to know what external countries have been interfering in our democracy. And the best example, I think, Guy, you just gave a few minutes ago, is that you've got bloody Nigel Farage on the phone to Donald Trump live on his own radio show, basically pumping out a perspective. If that's not bloody interference in our democracy, tell me what is.
I know completely. And it was Nigel Farage, and I'll try and find the quote, who said something along the lines that if an American president ever tried to influence an election in the UK, it would be the biggest injustice in modern history. It was something along those lines. I'll kind of loosely quote him. But then we cast to the situation now where he's actually hosting the phone call. I mean, does this man have any integrity?
You just couldn't make it up. And I think that's why, we need to strike back, and we can only strike back through the ballot box. And that's really the only way that it can be done. So, all of our viewers, whichever way you vote, we would urge you to use your democratic right to vote out those who are corrupting our democratic system, and bring those in who we have faith in that are actually going to save it. we move on a bit, Guy, and you know, we're in the same theme here because we're talking about dirty tricks, aren't we? And yesterday we mentioned on our stream about the doctoring of Keir Starmer's interview with Good Morning Britain. I always forget the name of the lady that sits next to Piers.
Susanna Reid.
Do you remember her name?
Susanna Reid, I think.
That's the one, yeah. So Susanna and Piers were basically interviewing Keir Starmer about Labour's Brexit position. Perfectly fine to have such an interview and to question him. It's obviously, you know, a very, very valid topic of conversation for many of their viewers. You and I discussed this off air, and we felt that actually he gave quite a measured and sound, decent response that wasn't rebuked at all by. I mean, you know, Piers can go in hard as well, can't he, in interviews? But it seemed to have an acceptable. Okay, yeah, that's the position. And
interrogated Keir Starmer like he should, and Keir had a very good answer for it. Everything.
Absolutely. What and this is where it just gets completely untenable. That what the Tory, not an affiliated organisation, the Tory party, the Conservative Party headquarters did, is then they took that video and edited it and doctored it in the way to basically put a pause in between an answer about Labour's, following a question about Labour's Brexit policy, to basically make Keir Starmer look very confused about what Labour's position would be. And actually, I have to say that the great thing about having PERDA in place, i.e. the regulations to have to basically tell the truth by the mainstream media, is that it did blow up. And I actually was pleasantly surprised with the media's response to how well reported that was, because it's, you know, again, these are really, really important issues. This is democracy that is being restricted and manipulated. What's your view on that, Guy? Then, so what did you catch any of that this morning?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to put it out on record firstly, because we do get accused of being a bit biased on here, that if Labour are to employ any sort of dirty tricks like this, I'll be the first to call it out. But we have a situation here where we've got a video that's been deliberately doctored and manipulated to try and make a Labour representative, Keir Starmer, seem confused on an important issue. And he answered instantly. And the clever thing Good Morning Britain did, so they put the clips side to side in front of James Cleverly, and they showed how that video had been manipulated. And
I like that.
I think that's transparency, and that is being honest with people. I'm happy the media, for once, in the last kind of 3 years in which they've smeared the Labour movement continuously, for once they've actually taken the truth and run with it. The truth being that they doctored and edited a video to manipulate voters. And why are they manipulating voters? Because they don't have a credible line to tell people. They don't have any hope to offer people. The reason Labour aren't employing these dirty tricks is because we've got a message of hope, a message of change, something people can get behind. And the Tories have nothing to offer but spin and manipulation. And we see it right in front of us.
Well, I was literally going to ask you that next, Guy, that, you know, why would they turn to such dirty tricks? And I think a couple of streams ago, we've talked about this, and my perspective on this was always that watch out for this really, really filthy campaign by the Tories. I don't think we're going to go head to head on policies, because I think they know that Labour has got an excellent manifesto which is due to be released. I think that they are really, really banking on the chances of these alleged polls of Jeremy Corbyn allegedly being so far behind in terms of his personal rating. But again, they've missed a trick, because elections are not fought always on personal ratings. You know, personal ratings are certainly inclusive and important, and people will be thinking about who they want their prime minister to be. But policy, how are you going to affect my life? How are you going to change my life? What are you as a party going to do for me? How are you going to deliver Brexit? Am I going to lose my job after Brexit? These are all important things that people with any sense will go to the ballot box thinking. And I think the Tories know this, that actually, I mean, I was listening on the radio today in terms of where the Tories stand economically. and it should have been today, should have been the day that Sajid Javid released his sort of public spending outlay budget. And obviously it wasn't to be, because we're in obviously a general election. But it sounds as if the Tories have basically spent so much of the public money that there isn't really much movement left in terms of being able to borrow more. Now, this is precisely the thing that the Tories are accusing Labour of doing, borrowing money, taxing people. Well, whichever way you look at it, if the Tories are going to, not that I believe that they will deliver any of this, but if the Tories are going to deliver half of what they're promising, the money is going to have to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the issue lies, is that they aren't at the races when it comes to a policy discussion. And actually, I have to say, compared to Theresa May, there was a very, very strong narrative that campaign was trying to run in respect of blaming Labour and saying, well, how are they going to pay for it? Well, we've heard very little of that, because actually they know that they're going to probably need to use similar means of generating money to fund some of these policies. So it's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the first point you touched on was so accurate about, Jeremy Corbyn's personal polling ratings are low. We accept that. We do know he's a divisive, unpopular figure among many. We believe in him, but other people share a different view. But you're right in saying it's not a presidential election. It's not about the person in charge. It's about what we're going to do for the country. It's about what our plan is. And I think Corbyn hit the nail on the head earlier as well when he said, I'm getting into power so that I can give the power back to you. And that's what you're doing with a vote for Jeremy Corbyn. A vote for Labour and a vote for Corbyn is a vote to get power handed back to the people of our country.
Yeah.
Because we have the elite in power, we have the rich in power, and the hedge funds and the bankers are going all out to donate to Boris Johnson, because they know that when Corbyn comes in and he realises the situation the Tories have left us in, a mass kind of decade of austerity, not being able to clear the public deficit, and actually, as you're saying, so much borrowing that we're left with pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
Pretty much nothing. And something needs to happen. Radical change needs to happen. And that's where redistribution of wealth comes in. That's where increasing the tax on the top 5% to free up money to fund exemplary public services, better housing for homeless people, a better benefit system to replace universal credit with, better jobs, tackle the climate crisis. And we need the money to be able to carry out these visions, and that's our way of doing it. So I'd ask the Conservatives, what's their way of implementing policy? If you're going to cut tax for the rich, 9.6 billion in cuts for the rich, where on earth is the money coming from? Another magic money tree?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah, absolutely. And then if things weren't bad enough in terms of all of the other snowballs we've talked about, you can see on screen, guys, just as Boris Johnson is about to do his big bad speech to the country in terms of officially unveiling the dissolving of Parliament, we then have a cabinet resignation.
Alan Kearns was a cabinet minister, and apparently resigned because there were claims that he knew about a former aide's role in the sabotage of a rape trial, which, as you probably agree with me, is extremely concerning.
Yeah, slightly. Yeah,
and I think it's a situation kind of jump before you're pushed, if you know what I mean. He's stepped down now. He's resigned. Well, I won't say with dignity, because
one's hands are dirty. One's hand must be dirty, you would think.
With the revelation today, he's not resigned with dignity, but he stepped down because the Conservative Party don't want to have to kick someone out. It's a travesty. It's an extremely bad situation for them, and it's just another one of the terrible things that's happened in the kickoff to their campaign. And voters, they're losing voters. They're losing public opinion when things like this happen, because it just decreases the level of trust among the public in these corrupt people.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I must admit to you, Guy, that there was so much going on today that I did hear about this story, but I must confess I didn't have too much time to put into reading about this. But what's gone on with this rape thing? I mean, do we know any more details? What's been alleged to have done?
Yeah, so the kind of the premise of this is that there's been this trial, this rape trial, and someone was involved in sabotaging and collapsing the case.
Yeah.
And what the alleged kind of, what they're saying that this cabinet minister has done is that he was aware of it, but he didn't act on what he was aware of. Potentially there was personal interest there, potentially potentially he was protecting someone that was in the Conservative circle. Wow. But what we know from the Tories, and it's happened kind of twice today, is they're more interested in protecting their own backs than delivering transparency. It's the same with the Russia report. If they were interested in transparency, they'd publish it. But instead, what they're doing is keeping it close to their chest because they don't want to hurt their own public image. And it's, I think, a similar situation here, to be honest.
Well, the cat's out the bag now, isn't it, Guy? So I think for day one of an election, one wonders what the next few weeks will bring. But I think we've bashed the Tories enough now. Not that
never get tired of doing it. But yeah.
Never bashed the Tories enough. But I think the Lib Dems deserve a bashing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not time to move on. It would be untraditional to not kind of talk about it.
And you know me, Guy. I like to hold back on this. I don't like too much Lib Dem bashing, but I think they do deserve a little bit. What's going on with these fibs? I mean, they're known as the fib Dems. They're known as obviously taking literally anybody in as an MP. But if I can just share this screen, what we are hearing is that there's been a lot of talk and sort of accusations around misleading and as you can see on screen, misleading and irresponsible leaflets. What are you making of these leaflets? Have you seen any of these leaflets?
Yeah, I've read up a lot on this, so get ready because this is shocking. I mean, there's multiple instances of the Lib Dems employing similar manipulation that we see by the Tories. I mean, we accuse the Conservatives across the past half an hour of running a dirty campaign, but the Lib Dems is something else. There we go. Tweet by Heather Stewart, which I have sitting on my phone in front of me.
Yeah,
that is probably the first point I'd make. So on an election leaflet by the Lib Dems, they said that the Liberal Democrats are winning across the country, and they put in two quotes. One quote, supposedly by The Guardian, said Lib Dems winning and on the up after by-election victory. That quote wasn't from The Guardian. That was a quote The Guardian used of Joe Swinson in their own newspaper. So they claim it's The Guardian. It's actually their own leader. So they're claiming they've been endorsed by a newspaper when the quote they're using was something that Joe Swinson put in The Guardian. And it's just preposterous. But also, I'm sure you're aware of the poll. They did a poll in Jacob Rees-Mogg's constituency.
Yeah.
And it had the Lib Dems a very close second when they were a distant third the last time. But then at the bottom, in size 1 font that no one could see, when you zoom in, people were asked, how would you vote if it was a close race between the Tories and the Lib Dems and no one else had a chance? How disingenuous can you be? I mean, that font was tiny. You have to zoom in about 500% to be able to read. Yeah. And it's
all you could basically see was the blue bar and the yellow bar and a tiny little red bar. I mean, it just,
these Lib Dems winning here bar are getting out of hand. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and again, it's a similar kind of thing to the Tories, isn't it? Are they seeing Labour as the great? Because I mean, look, if we were going to compare the sort of Brexit policy, and I said this a few streams ago, that I think that the Lib Dems were in a very strong position to come out first and be the party of second referendum. However, the way they went was basically revoke. And I mean, even on not that it's a full representation of people's views, but I think on was it Sky News earlier? What's his name? Their correspondent went out and interviewed some people out and about, and he spoke to some Remainers who basically said that yeah, I might have voted Lib Dem in the European elections, but that was purely for protest. I'm going to be voting. I'm a Remainer, and I'm going to be voting Labour because they're the only ones who are going to give a chance, a true chance of a second referendum and potentially for them remaining. It's the democratic way out of this, surely. And I think the voters know that if they do want to remain, and I think that differs from maybe where our view is, but the Remainers, if they do want to remain, then Labour is really the only way to vote, isn't it?
I mean, I'll say it loud and clear. I'll say it now. I am a Remainer, but also a Democrat. I do believe that this needs to be solved in a way that appeals to both sides, because Labour aren't the party of 52%. We're also not the party of 48%. We're the party of the 99%. We're the party of the many. And we will not take a side because it's the easy option. We're the only party with integrity. I think what you just touched on is completely accurate. Revoking and cancelling Brexit, what is that going to solve?
Absolutely.
Who are considering voting, what is that going to solve? It's going to divide our country further. It's going to polarize our country further, and it will not actually address the grievances and the issues of the 17.4 million who voted to leave in 2016. We need to listen to them. I know it's a figure that's thrown around by the right, but in actual fact, these are actual people who are really concerned about the way our country coordinates itself within another body, being the EU. And this is why Labour Brexit policy is so good, because we give a credible option to leavers that protects their jobs, protects workers' rights, protects our economy, and protects environmental regulations. But we also give Remainers the option to actually decline that and say, no, we think our place is better within the EU. We're giving both sides a chance here. Surely that's something people should get behind.
You know, you're absolutely right. And just to sort of finish our point off so that we're aware of, there's a great website here, fullfact.org. I know we've spoken about it before, but if you can see on the screen now, this was the exact what the Lib Dems had basically put out, and this was the full fact. So the claim was that the Conservatives are polling at 38% in North East Somerset, which is ironically Mr. Rees-Mogg's seat, and that the Lib Dems were on 32 and Labour were on 8. These are results of a poll asking how many people in the area, as you said earlier, would vote only if the Lib Dems and Conservatives were competitive in really, really, really small writing. And you can see, guys, for our viewers, that this is exactly what they did. And you can hardly see that writing there. And that, to the average man or woman, would look like that actually the Lib Dems are polling really close to the Conservative Party. But in actual fact, it was quite the opposite. It was in that particular election, the 2017 election, the Lib Dems were in single figures. So, look, guys, if Joe Swinson, I know you probably won't, but if you ever catch this video, you need to stop lying, love. Work with honest politics. Tell the truth. You know, realistically, Joe, you will not be Prime Minister. And as much as you may have pipe dreams about that, it's not going to happen. You haven't got the numbers now. You didn't have the numbers until a number of defected MPs came into your party. And I actually think it will be a good election for you, Joe, if you keep those seats. I really do. But tell the truth. And I think this is what I just wanted to come on to next is that the Labour Party have had a good, I mean, they've been campaigning even before the official election has started. But I think they've had a good campaign because it's been honest and clean, Guy.
Yeah. I mean, we're telling people how it is. We're admitting our faults. We're admitting where we've gone wrong, but we're telling people what we do right. We're telling people what a Labour government would do, what our plan is across the next 5 years. We're not using gutter politics. We're not using dirty tricks, and we're just being honest with people. And I did want to just mention, and it kind of loosely connected to this.
Go on.
We all know Jacob Rees-Mogg's comments about the Grenfell victims. We've talked about that extensively, but Corbyn put out a tweet earlier, which I think I just need to read out because it just shows the kind of the sheer difference between the Tories and Labour. So I'll just quote Corbyn's tweet now. He said, "The Tories say the victims of Grenfell didn't have common sense. I'll tell you what's common sense. Don't put flammable cladding on people's homes. Don't build fire stations and don't cut firefighters. And don't ignore residents when they tell you their home is a death trap." Does that not just show you that you have an option here between the out-of-touch elite who do not care about you in comparison to a man who, yes, he may be unpopular, but he does care about you. He does care about your interests. He cares about working people. And that's really the person we need in power.
Well, you say that about him not being popular, and these is what certain polls are showing. But I tell you something, I would take a hunch that he is more popular in reality than Boris Johnson.
Oh, of course, of course.
I think the good thing is about, I'm saying the good thing, but you've got a testing ground of a sitting prime minister that is literally hated. He is booed literally everywhere he goes. Now, they won't show this stuff on the mainstream media, but Corbyn isn't booed wherever he goes. He might get the odd heckle now and again, but he's certainly not booed, Guy.
Yeah, I mean, when I say Corbyn's unpopular, I'm literally just kind of going in accordance to what the polls are saying. But you're completely right in that the mainstream media narrative is that, yes, maybe across the country, if you're to ask someone in a poll, do you like Jeremy Corbyn, they might not completely support him. But in actuality, you're completely right. What we see is when Boris Johnson goes into hospital, when Boris Johnson goes into a school, when Boris Johnson's out on the streets, there is protest, there is anger, there is shouting, there's complete disregard. But when Corbyn turns up to an event, or when Corbyn's in an NHS building, in a hospital, when he's in a school, there's crowds and crowds of people gathering around on 12 hours notice, thousands packing halls. I mean, the Conservative Party did their election launch today, and there was a hall they booked that could have fit 10,000 by my prediction, and what 500 odd turned up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
In terms of on the ground and whether people are kind of popular among people, normal people outside the Westminster bubble, you're completely right. Corbyn's very popular, but if you're looking at the polls and the stats, it does say otherwise. It is a bit of a contrast between reality, what the media are saying. But what I do know from the doorstep is that people have concerns about Jeremy Corbyn, but all we need to do is address those. We need to tell them that maybe some of the information they heard about him isn't completely correct, but also that it's not about one man, and Corbyn said it himself. It's not about him. It's about our movement. It's about our party bringing about the change that people so desperately need.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't have put it better myself. And then finally, we move on, Guy, to the big news of the day. And I must admit, I mean, we were only supposed to do about half an hour, but we're nearly filling a normal-sized show. But I think it's just because of how eventful today's been, and when everything should have really calmed down, and actually it's time to start again in the morning with another Kay Burley show. We get some brand new news of Tom Watson resignation, standing down as deputy leader and as an MP. Were you shocked when you heard this?
Well, I was actually sitting in a Labour Party campaign meeting discussing some strategy, and my phone buzzes, and I pick my phone up out of my pocket. I look on BBC News, and notifications come up. Tom Watson's quit Labour deputy leader position. He stand down as an MP, and I just looked at it for a second. I went, "Is this really happened? Has this really happened at the start of a general election?" I was in complete shock, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm a bit mixed about it, to be honest with you, Guy, because you just wonder what the motives are there. But you and I spoke about this offline.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful and it's not so helpful. Certainly the timing, as we've discussed, isn't the greatest of timing. But I suppose you could argue that actually his resignation mixes in alongside. It's quite late in the day as well. So yes, it will be sort of first thing in the morning, sort of discussed quite openly. And we will have the usual media channels talking about how detrimental this will be to the Labour Party. And viewers of this channel will know that I myself have been very critical of Tom Watson. But I think we want to take this opportunity to discuss this with some dignity, really, because although we've been very critical of Tom Watson, and it's always been because of the love for the Labour Party and the movement. And I've always said, Guy, that listen, you know what? Not everybody's going to agree with each other. You work in a team at work, you're going to see eye to eye with people, and there's going to be disagreements with some people. You're going to disagree fundamentally on how you should work and how things sort of go and how you move ahead with things. But my call has always been that there's no need for Tom Watson to call Sky News up or BBC or ITV or Channel 4, whichever that may be, to pull out his contradictory perspective of that from the leadership. Because, and I must commend him for the love that he's showing now and saying that he will continue to campaign and fight for a Labour government, that shows that, you know, there is some credibility. And even George Galloway and even some of his fiercest critics have come out tonight, and I welcome this, and I actually commend people on these sort of high-profile individuals and the sort of non-known Joe Public who come out and with dignity and said, do you know what, there are some good things that Tom Watson has done. Because I think that actually when the mainstream media do try and say, oh, this is going to be really detrimental to Labour and their voters and their members, I think responding to this in negativity and say, oh, really, really gloating and enjoying Tom Watson's resignation can only go down negatively for the election chances. And so actually I commend all of our comrades out there who have responded with dignity and praised Tom Watson for some of the positive work that he's done, but at the same time is constructively criticising him and saying, actually, there's some conversations that he could have had behind closed doors.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with your position, and also just agree with the fact that we should conduct our debate about this situation humanely and as, you know, civil people who would agree that we can disagree sometimes and that we can have different views on this. My position on Tom Watson before this, and that I can praise him for a lot of things, I can also criticise him for a lot of things.
Absolutely.
I've been very kind of middle way with him. I accept there's a lot he's done for movement, but I also accept there are places where he could have done better. But what we can both commend, I'm sure, is the integrity in which he's kind of stepped down. I know that there could be motives behind it. I'm very shocked at the timing, but the fact that he's actually stepped down and he's not blasted some nonsense to the party like some other people who have stepped down have. He's actually said, I continue to be committed to this movement. I just don't think I can carry it through honestly in the position. And you've got to praise that. I mean, even George Galloway's fiercest critic who's running against him is praising that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I thank you for that. But my frustration with this is that we're going into a general election. We need an upbeat, vibrant deputy leader to be kind of leading the way behind Corbyn, enforcing the fact that he is the man for the job, but also enforcing our message of hope and positivity. And what saddens me of anything, and this is not an attack on Tom Watson, his personality or anything, is that we don't have that person anymore. We don't have that deputy leader who's going to lead us into an election with a kind of all the vigor and positivity that a deputy leader should have. So yes, we're missing out on that front, but we've had God knows what thrown at us over the last 3 years.
Yeah,
it isn't going to stop us. We're still going to win this election.
Guy, you know what? This could have been much worse because, you know, if we don't want to forget too easily how those 10, 11 or so MPs left us in the middle of last year when the whole thing around anti-Semitism was all coming out. He could have done some damage in the method in which he left us, Tom Watson, on this occasion. He could have took some MPs with him. I always had fears that Tom Watson would start a new so-called centrist movement and take a load of the Labour Party Blairites with him, but he didn't. And whatever happens now moving forward, I can only thank him and commend him. I mean, I must say that it all did erupt at Labour Party conference this year, when there was this almost this coup. I won't say a coup, but there was an attempt to oust him, which he, to be fair, Jeremy Corbyn, again, just showing you how the integrity of Jeremy Corbyn, intervened and saved his bacon. He, to be fair, went quite quiet after that. I think some kind of deal has been done behind the scenes where I think they've had an agreement that actually, you know what, maybe these two wings of the party, or certainly him being the leader of one of those wings, is not going to work out I personally think, and I may be wrong at this, I personally think that Tom Watson has seen that actually Jeremy Corbyn is going to be our next Prime Minister. Maybe as a person or as a value base, he can't necessarily support that. So rather than humiliating him, I really truly think, and I'm sorry I'm about to compliment Tom Watson here, but I think he's acted with some dignity, and I really want to believe that. I really want to believe that he has thought, do you know what? I may differ with these people, I may differ with the leadership, and I may not agree with the way they do things, but actually I love the Labour Party more, and going out with an explosion is going to damage the Labour Party and cause some collateral. So I think, and I thank him if he has gone out with good motives. I think he's only done a good justice to the Labour Party.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better myself, but I suppose the question now is, and we do have to move forward, is prospectively, say we win this general election, say we get into government, either majority or in coalition, and we're in a position where we are in government, who are you backing to be the next deputy leader of the Labour Party? Is there a figure you have in mind?
Yeah, I do. It's going to be out of Laura Pidcock and Rebecca Long-Bailey. Oh,
exactly the answer I was getting.
But there is an outsider, and you and I have talked about Clive Jones, haven't we? I love Clive. He's just my guy. I love his tweets. I tell you what got me, and I've followed him for a long time, Guy, on Twitter and whatnot. He was on an interview last week on Newsnight. I don't know if you caught that interview.
No, I think I missed that.
And I can't remember which presenter it was. It wasn't Emily Maitlis. It was the other lady that was interviewing him. And she was trying all sorts of tricks to sort of catch Clive out on a number of things. And the way that he handled her and answered the question and so eloquently handled it was amazing. And that's not to say that Laura, to be fair, is equally brilliant in front of the cameras. Rebecca Long-Bailey, not so much, but I would strike a guess that Rebecca Long-Bailey's probably got a little bit more experience than Laura Pidcock. But Guy, give me any one of those three, and I agree with John McDonnell in some ways that it'd be great to have a woman, a female, as a deputy leader. But give me any one of those three, Guy, and I'll be happy.
I mean, I've always held the view. Well, I mean, we do live in a society, and of course, I acknowledge the people who don't fit into these two categories. But we're basically in a society that are 50% male, 50% female, and of course, anyone who chooses to identify in a different way. But I think leadership in a party should reflect that. And the two most powerful positions in our party are leader and deputy leader. So either way around, for me, it has to be one male, one female. For me, it either has to be a female leader and a deputy male leader, or a male leader and a deputy female leader. So I really do back Laura Pidcock. I hope she takes the challenge.
You go for Laura?
I'd back her if she was in the running. But I also have a lot to say about Clive Lewis, because he recently came and spoke at one of our Hertsmere Labour Party.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
And, you know, we're a safe Tory seat. We've never had acknowledgement from any Labour MPs or cabinet ministers. And for him to actually come down meant a lot to us. And he came in. There was no sense of entitlement about him. There was no sense of prestige about him. He came in and we just felt like he was family. He came in and he fit right in. He gave his speech. He allowed for a multitude of questions, went quite far into the night. And then he stayed behind to talk to people at the end. He's just such a nice and genuine. Yeah. I was so lucky to have a conversation with him.
You know what else is important as well, Guy, for me personally? You've got 3 working class MPs there.
Yeah.
You know, state schools, no Eton, Oxford, Cambridge kind of sort of education. They're from the roots. They're from the streets. Do you know what I mean?
Another thing about Clive, he's so down to earth, but also kind. We need kindness in our politics. As you said, we need working class people in power to reflect our society.
You know, Clive's mixed race. You know, do it for the brothers, Clive. You know what I'm saying, right? You know, but equally, listen, give me any one of those three. I think John McDonnell's right. It's time we had our first female deputy leader who, you know, somebody, Guy, that's actually going to fill the shoes of a future leader that learns on the job. Because I think we were all uncomfortable. You don't want to slate Tom Watson too much because we've complimented him so much this evening. But we're always comfortable about Tom taking the reins from Corbyn. And again, it's another example of Corbyn and his integrity. Endorsed Tom Watson because he saw that actually, you know what, we need to keep both wings of the party happy. It's just unfortunate that that wing didn't play ball as the leadership's wing, Corbyn's wing. So I think that now's the time, and I'm having goosebumps even thinking about this, Guy. You know that you know, imagine a prime ministerial premiership with Jeremy Corbyn, with a Pidcock or a Lewis or a Long Bailey next to him. Wow, that sends shivers.
It would be so brilliant. And I know we put forward these three people, but it's not to say that there are many others who I completely support. I mean,
Jess Phillips.
Potentially. I mean, we'll have to wait and see.
Not for me, I'm afraid. Guys, sorry.
I mean, I'll take everything at face value. I'll look at the candidates. For me, it has to be someone who's aligned with Corbyn's views, someone centre-left, a socialist. Because we've got to keep.
She'll stab in at the dispatch box. This James Phillips will.
Look, we need someone who'll be enthusiastic, and we need someone who will back our party, who will back our members who've elected Corbyn twice, and that's all I'd ask for. And if a candidate stands up and they claim to do that, they've got my vote.
Well, whatever we do now, excuse me, it's going to be interesting, isn't it, Guy? Whatever happens moving forward. Listen, Guy, we've done an hour. We've had viewers on, and I thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I've really enjoyed tonight's stream, Guy. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, that so much has happened today, so we've managed to get through it.
It's been crazy. We've had to cram it all in. Look, on let's hook up later on, either tomorrow or later on in the week. I think it's going so far so good for Labour. I think long may this continue. We've just got to keep hitting the momentum, keep bringing out the policies, and keep fighting honestly, because the country is seeing at the moment the Tories for what they are. You know, it's a shame when I see young Tories like Emily Hewitson. I don't know if you know who she is. She's the blonde girl that came on Question Time years ago. You see her, you almost feel like reading her tweets and she's gritting her teeth while she's writing them, because she knows that they're bullshit, basically, trying to cover up the likes of James Cleverly and how that there's a left-wing agenda against him. I mean, you know, look, we need honest politics, and this country's suffered far too long, Guy, with basically bullshit, fibs and lies with the establishment, neoliberal establishment. We need an honest man or woman as Prime Minister. We need honest politics. We need somebody who is going to deliver what they promise. And we've had far too many of those. Last night it was on the news. What did they say? 200,000 homes would be built, promised by the Tories. How many of them, do you guess, were built, Guy?
Would it be not a single one?
Not a single one. Look, Tories, I'm trying to give you something, but you know, you just keep throwing out the bullshit. So yeah, look, it's still running good for Labour. We need to continue the momentum. We want you guys to get involved and interact with the show as much as possible. If you want to get involved, guys, if you want to come on a live stream, please DM us on Twitter, email us at YouthViewz with a Z on the end at outlook.com. Happy to bring anybody's views on. We want to bring more right-wing people on the show as well. This isn't a show for just people on the left. We want to come and debate these issues as this general election approaches us. Guy, any final comments from you before we go?
I mean, my final comment would be to reinforce what you just said. We want people with all sorts of views on this show. We want people who disagree with us, because we've just shown today we can have debate, we can disagree, but we can do it in a civil manner. And I'd love to have some people who do disagree, because I think talking with people who are of the opposite opinion only kind of strengthens both people in being able to reinforce their point, being able to challenge, being able to counter. That's what debate's about. And if we provide an alternative to the mainstream media that pours lies on top of lies on top of lies, smearing Labour, and letting the elite back into power, if we can provide a platform where genuine conversations between genuine people can occur on different sides of the political platform without it being violent and polarized, then I can only support that. But once again, thanks for having me on.
No problem, right? You've been brilliant, and listen, just keep it locked. Let's hope tomorrow is as entertaining but not as gruesome as it has been. Listen, guys, thank you very much for tuning into YouthViewz. We'll see you very soon. God bless.